Hey, good afternoon, good morning, everybody, depending on which part of this beautiful country that you're in. I'd like to welcome you to the Rebel News Daily Roundup. I'm one of the co-hosts today. My name is Sheila Gunn-Reid, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Tamara Ugolini. Tamara, how's it going?
Hey, Sheila, doing well, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It looks like I have a chapstick migrating outside of my lip line. Everybody at home, I'm sure
Happy
you had to see
Monday.
that. Isn't it? We all have a case of the Mondays here at the network, I think. This is, I'll tell everybody what we're doing and then let's just get into the news of the day because there's so much to talk about, particularly how, for a government that really just hates the Russians so much that they'll honor a Nazi, boy, they're sure acting like Soviets when it comes to their treatment of the internet. So we'll get to that in a second, but I'll tell everybody what we're doing here today. This is the Rebel News Daily Roundup. It's normally hosted by my friend David Menzies and a rotating cast of characters, including myself and Tamara. We're the characters that ride along shotgun white knuckling it through an episode of the show with David Menzies. But today, David Menzies is on special assignment, so it's me and Tamara. And this is a place where we talk about the news of the day, completely unscripted. I think you could probably pick that up. But it also gives us a chance to interact with each other because I work remotely. I work very closely with Tamara on everything day to day, but we don't often get to actually see our faces when we talk to each other. So that's kind of fun. But we also get to interact with you, the viewer, and Rebel News supporter at home. So if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for your loyalty despite the extreme censorship that you face on that platform. But might I suggest you migrate over to a platform that cares very little about your political leanings, like Rumble, but also Odyssey. On Rumble, you can engage in the live chat there and leave us a paid chat called the Rumble Rant. On Odyssey, it's called the Hyper Chat. And the beauty of those is that it helps us keep the lights on here at Rebel News because we'll never take a penny from Justin Trudeau. And how could we ever hold him to account if we did? Mainstream media. But it also gives you a chance to democratize the show. So if your comment, question, story idea, whatever you choose to chat with us about is above the $5 US baseline, we are obligating ourselves to read it on air, whatever it might be, and we'll do our best to comment on it. If it's underneath that amount, thank you very much. We are not obligating ourselves to read that chat, but if you're a regular viewer of the show, you know we read many of those chats every single day that are far underneath the $5 cutoff. In fact, we often read free chats because we find them to be interesting. So let that be incentive for you to engage in the live chat and reach out to us by leaving a comment. I think that's it. Tamara, let's get into Justin Trudeau's Soviet-style stranglehold on the internet because it continues to get worse. I'll let you take the lead here.
Well, and they announced, so this is in regards to the Canadian Radio Television Corporation's recent announcement on Friday afternoon that they are taking a major step forward to allegedly modernize Canada's broadcasting system. And they say that this happened following broad consultations. They're releasing their first two decisions, including which online streaming services must register with us. So if you want to stream anything online, social media, what have you, you must first register with the Canadian delegated regulator of all things social media and internet. And it's really strange. Well, I guess it's unsurprising that they went ahead and they released this at 2 p.m. on a Friday. A lot of people also were having a federal holiday, either Friday or Monday, thanks to Truth and Reconciliation, I guess. We should pay our bureaucrats. Yeah, we should pay bureaucrats to have the day off. Wherein Justin Trudeau has been seen in previous years heading over to British Columbia on the coast to engage in some quality reconciliation surfing.
Tasty waves.
Ezra had actually a really good thread on what these regulations mean. And we're going through and I'm trying to just pull this up here. We're going to go through and confirm and write up and kind of break it all down for everybody what this really means. And I'm sure there will be some sort of, what Rebel News is doing about it to come. But, first, right off the bat, Ezra says this is the government's way of hiding things is by announcing them on a Friday afternoon. Trudeau announced that he now requires YouTubers, live streamers, and podcasters to register with the government as part of his internet censorship strategy. And there is a whole string of tweets here by Ezra that kind of breaks it down for you. I really like number 3 here, where he says that the CRTC is a relic of the age of radio and TV, created in 1976. And it's been for more than a decade, where they've, other than handed out lucrative monopolies of Canada's cell phone cartel, where it's actually just recently come to light. Well, and many of us already knew this, but Canadians literally pay the highest phone rates in the world thanks to this regulator that is a relic that is created
because they allow zero competition in the marketplace. They protect these big monopolies from the big broadcast telecommunications companies. So in Canada, your cable or your satellite or your internet and your cell phone are often all the same provider because you don't get to shop. And in the United States, if you listen to podcasters in the United States, which who knows if we're going to get to do that for very much longer here in Canada, but they always, like Matt Walsh is always advertising like these little itty bitty cell phone companies. And I'm like, wow. Imagine if you could just shop for a cell phone provider that wasn't like, and in Canada, like all the the budget brands are still part of the big monopoly. Anyways, I'll be quiet. Tamara, please go on. Cell phones irritate me to no end. I'll be quiet.
Yeah, likewise. And so do the bills that coincide with them. But that is essentially what the CRTC will do here with this regulation. They'll do the exact same thing as we've seen happen to cell phone companies. They will act as a conglomerate. They're going to monopolize the industry, i.e. the internet, and they're going to squash any sort of competition. So only those which the state approves, which is primarily going to be the Canadian state broadcaster, the CBC, they will get the they will become front runners in the algorithm, and the little guys they won't even stand a chance. So you'll have a handful of who the state thinks is approved and who they go ahead and approve that you can hear from and you can find readily and easily on the internet. And everybody else, well, sayonara to you, because we're now going to control everything that you can access and find on the World Wide Web. And it's really a way for them to monopolize on information, as the government becomes hyper-focused on this idea of dis and misinformation, which I would counter. They have been the forerunners of and at, especially highlighted throughout the last 3 years with their pandemic response nonsense. You can point out the loopholes in what they say versus what actually happened all day long. But unless that information is making it to the eyes and the ears of Canadians, then they may be none the wiser unless they are extremely capable of critical thinking, which we see more and more because of the state-backed propaganda techniques. Canadians are losing that ability to think and see clearly for themselves. And so this is just another way where the government will ensure that the information they want you to have is the only thing that will reach you.
And I'm glad you pointed out that the CBC will get preferential treatment in the algorithm. That's already something that the government is mandating through one of their censorship laws, that Canadian content get preferential treatment in the algorithm. But past behavior is an excellent predictor of future behavior. So we already know that CBC gets preferential treatment from the CRTC through their mandatory carriage. So if you buy a cable package in Canada, or if you have a TV set in Canada, you get the CBC whether you want it or not. And then the cable companies or the satellite companies that provide this give a portion of their cable package back to the CBC. That's why getting mandatory carriage in cable packages is so important. And the CRTC did not do that for Sun News Network, which was this exclusively Canadian, albeit right-wing or center-right, all-news channel. So and it outrageous that they were denied mandatory carriage, which would have given them enough revenue to build a company around. But in Canada, if you get a cable package, not only do you get CBC because it's Canadian content, really, But you also get CNN, which is not Canadian content. So think about that for a second. CNN is mandatory carriage in Canada, but Sun News Network was not. Why? Because it was conservative, and CNN is just a hot mess. But also past behavior being a predictor of future behavior, I've seen some criticisms, and so far those criticisms tend to be slightly accurate, that the government is saying that this will not affect individual podcasters. If what it wants is the podcast platform to register with the government, Spotify, YouTube, Anchor, Wondery, or whatever, right? Okay, that's what the government is saying right now, but this is a government that also said that it wouldn't go after hunting rifles in its new gun control legislation. The government gets everything wrong, or actually probably they get everything right. They just think Canadians aren't smart enough to see through the lies. So they've constantly lied about what Bill C-18 does. They've constantly lied about what Bill C-11 does. They lied about what their gun control legislation would actually do in effect. And as gun owners know, by the way, we know that registration leads to confiscation. Why do we think this is going to be any different from the Liberals on this latest piece of modernizing the CRTC? Interesting choice of words, given that you're bringing the CRTC back to Soviet era East Germany days when you had to register your typewriter with the government in case something offensive to the state rolled off the keys of your typewriter. This is the same thing. So in modernizing everything, they seem to be rolling everything back 50 to 60 years. And that's because the internet has been a place where people could consume ideas that harm the government's agenda. And so what are we going to do about that? We're going to register things, and then we're going to confiscate them.
Well, and a Liberal senator himself discussed that exact concern when they were voting to pass this bill and pass it through the Senate. And, you know, he made these horrible, horrendous, chilling comparisons to Stalin's Pravda, to Hitler's book burning, to these dictatorial regimes and how they handled the press and newsprint. And that all seems to have fallen on deaf ears, at least to the Liberal-led government that is keen on censoring and regulating the internet. And I find it really funny, actually, and strange and sad that the CRTC has said that this followed broad consultations. I put a link here from April of 2023 from lawyer Michael Geist. He's done so much work on this file. If you don't know about him or his blog, you can find it at michaelgeist.ca. But in April, he posted, the headline here is the Canadian Heritage Credibility Gap on Online Harms. So these bills are under the Online Harms Act. And the public report did not disclose that there was actually 90% of people who were polled, or who were consulted rather, actually opposed the 2021 proposal. And so he discovered this, and you know, I won't go through the whole article, but essentially he discovered this through access to information documents. This was never disclosed anywhere publicly. He couldn't find it when he was reading through their consultations, where the actual submissions were, what the submissions read, so on and so forth. So he had to file an access to information request to find out. And what he discovered was that 90% of respondents were actually opposed to this kind of legislation. So for the CRTC to come forward and say that they conducted broad consultation and this was somehow agreed upon is just a bold-faced lie. And I guess that lends to the reason why they need to further regulate the internet, because Canadians can see right through it. And unless we have someone who's being critical, who's speaking that truth to power, who's providing tangible evidence and or questions to the government, whatever their flavor of the day may be, then they just have to believe what the government says verbatim.
And I was just digging down on like what Canadian content might get an exception from the Online Streaming Act here. And it's Pornhub. Pornhub, backed by MindGeek, which is a Montreal-based company implicated in sex trafficking, child pornography. Shoot, we're gonna get nuked on YouTube if I continue to talk about this. But implicated in all manner of sex-related crimes. It sounds like it might get a carve out of C11 because it's not Canadian cultural content that the government is expected to protect. So they might just, because they're an online streaming platform, they might get an exemption from this. So Canadian news, you can't get access to Canadian news right now as a reflex to the government's attempts to extort social media platforms for payment if you share Canadian news, which is like making the newspaper boy pay you for delivering your newspaper. But anyway, it sounds like the big porn industry, the big sex trafficking industries are going to get a carve out of this. So that should tell you where the Liberal government's mind is at on this.
Mm-hmm. It's a racket. At the end of the day, what they're trying to do here to siphon fees from social media, and the social media platforms like Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, and a little bit Google, have decided to just proactively and preemptively abide by this Online Harms Act and are not sharing news on their platforms from Canada on their platforms anymore. And because their business models stand to lose a lot of revenue based on this, what I would call a racket. We have another funny tweet to share.
Yes, please. Let's do that. This is the fight I've been waiting for.
Yeah. And well, that's where I was kind of going with referencing Meta, is that Twitter, now called X, under the ownership of Elon Musk, they have just continued on as normal in wake of Musk actually taking ownership of the platform, which was previously highly censored without government regulations.
Oh, it's good again.
And so yeah, so for now anyway, I think they're looking to implement the Online Harms Act by the end of this year. So we have a few months left. We'll see what actually ends up happening. But Elon now has this on his radar. He retweeted Glenn Greenwald, who said that the Canadian government, armed with one of the world's most repressive online censorship schemes, announced that all online streaming services that offer podcasts must formally register with the government to permit regulatory controls. And to which Musk reposted, it's going to be hard to break out of that retweeting language, but anyway,
yes,
that Trudeau is trying to crush free speech in Canada. Shameful. And I don't know. I mean, I really wonder if Musk has any legal action up his sleeve shall the Trudeau regime decide to target Twitter, X, whatever it should formally be known as now.
As I said, this is the battle I've been waiting for. So with regard to Facebook and Meta, they went around Justin Trudeau's shakedown of social media companies, wherein the social media companies would have to pay the producer of the news for sharing the news. Again, Facebook acts as a free distributor for your content. You should probably be paying them for sharing your content, but you don't, because they get the information about the consumer so that they can sell them ads. It's been a system that's worked pretty well for a very long time. And of course, Justin Trudeau comes along and puts his hand right into the middle of it because he wants a piece so that he can give it to his enablers in the mainstream media to continue on with their failed business model. So Facebook and Meta said, actually, you know what? So we don't have to pay you. We are not allowing any sharing of Canadian news. This is how it's going to be, because we're not going to participate in the shakedown. Now Justin Trudeau is on a collision course with Twitter, or whatever it is called now, X, and Elon Musk, and I cannot wait for this fight, because instead of just doing the passive aggressive thing that Facebook and Instagram just did, we're going to, I think, end up in a major legal battle, because Elon Musk is a bit of a free speech madman in that he bought this failing company called Twitter. It was really so oppressive and so censorious that the only people who were on there were a bunch of self-censoring journalists and me for a very long time. It used to be fun back in the days of 2015, 2016. And then because honestly, I think because President Trump was able to use social media to go around conventional media to talk directly to his voters, the reflex of the very woke Silicon Valley oligarchs was to say, okay, well, we can't let this happen one more time. We have to start censoring and doing all this, shutting people up on the internet. People are having a little bit too much to think out there. So, but Elon Musk invested billions and billions, I think $50 billion of his own money into a dying company to advance free speech. And he's making a lot of changes at the company. There was a big purge. People actually had to start showing up for work at the company. He's adding new features all the time and allowing people to monetize their content on Twitter. And he's very innovative. And he is a true believer in free speech. And he, I think, is going to end up in court with the Canadian government in the interest of free speech. Or on the flip side, we just might not be able to access Twitter or X or whatever it's called in Canada because Justin Trudeau picked a fight with a free speech madman. So I'm interested to see how this goes. Elon Musk is very influential. He went from being a darling of the left because of his efforts to advance, green tech. But they turned on him real quick when he allowed people to have their own ideas about certain things. So you know what? I can't wait to see what shakes out of the trees here.
And likewise, I just hope that it is not, in fact, that we cannot access Twitter or X in Canada, which is, I guess, lends to why we've partnered with that private VPN company to make sure that you can protect not only your privacy, but your access to the news content. Now, just more on the Trudeau/censorship topic, in light of the honoring of a Nazi soldier in the House of Commons. We have reported here by the Toronto Star that rude, disrespectful, and unruly members of Parliament say the House of Commons has turned into a circus and someone needs to tame it. I don't know if this is a new phenomenon, really. I often, if you're watching CPAC or you're watching the back and forth in the House of Commons question period, I think it's been a circus for a really long time. And I agree someone needs to tame it, but I think it can be really easily tamed by quite literally just answering questions instead of this perpetual, constant, consistent deflection by the Liberals when they're asked, very straightforward yes or no answer. And they just give their complete politispeak word salad responses right back. And that's what I think makes it turn into this circus. And then, of course, this has all been exacerbated by the recent clapping seal applause by everyone in the House of Commons. That's opposition alike to this former Nazi soldier.
I like how it's all of a sudden a problem, things getting a little bit unruly in the House of Commons when the opposition actually starts doing their jobs and opposing the government. And when a controversial thing that the Liberals have done just won't seem to go away, all of a sudden the villagers are getting a little too uppity and they're speaking truth to power. And so some scold, Alex Ballingall, comes along from the Toronto Star of all places and tells people to shut up. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it does make sense to me because these sort of scolding articles were never written when Justin Trudeau was calling people a piece of fill in the blank in the House of Commons, or when he's storming through the House of Commons and elbowing an NDP MP in the boob. That it wasn't like we gotta, guys, people are getting hurt, we have to behave ourselves here. That was never actually that didn't spawn these scolding articles. What spawned these scolding articles was a desire to shut up the opposition and protect the dear leader at all costs. And to protect the dear leader also means to protect your subsidies from the dear leader. And this article reads like a grant application.
Well, and it's unsurprising too, given that the Toronto Star, when was this? August 26th, 2021. I don't know if we can pull up the photo. I just shared a link of we'll remember this, their front pager, where it says,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, it's all about the unvaccinated, like let them die, deny them hospital care. Unvaccinated patients do not deserve ICU beds. There's a simmering divide over who isn't vaccinated. I mean, there was no, as you said, Sheila, there was no condemning of this kind of like quite literally apartheid bordering, and I would even go so far as to say hate speech rhetoric.
Sure it is.
This is absolutely absurd. And that's only, just over 2 years ago that same newspaper decided that it was a good idea to print this. And, you can see here on the side, no jab could mean no job for Air Canada employees. And that did come to fruition. We saw countless people fired or terminated or put on unpaid leave as a coercive measure to ensure that they complied with COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And so you never had this kind of editorial position by that same newspaper that all of a sudden now it's like, well, now that we're facing scrutiny over inviting a literal Nazi to the House of Commons where everybody applauded and gave him a hero's welcome, and because people are upset, rightfully so, that this took place, I know it's been a week and a bit, but I'm still shocked that there hasn't been more high-level resignations as a result of this grotesque oversight, to put it nicely. Anthony Rota, I think, was the scapegoat on this. And I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of who's the censorious thug and who needs to actually take accountability and resign over this.
Well, and look, people in our company pitch their stories to me and Tamara all the time. And if somebody had pitched this story to me, I would have stopped. I would have put it in plain speak and said, do you think this sounds okay? Do you think this is a good article? This is a good story to do? Because if they pitched this to me, I would have said, so the premise of your story is that we are too outraged that the entire House of Commons, and particularly the Liberals, honored a Nazi war criminal. That's the premise of the article. Do you think that that is an appropriate article to write? Somebody at the Toronto Star was like, yep, sounds great. Let her rip. Whereas me and Tamara would be like, no, kill the story. Nope. Apparently they just don't care about their reputations over there or editorial control, obviously.
Very clearly. Okay. Oh, we have a super chat we'll get to here. Spirit Whisperer 2021 gives $20. Thank you very much. Hi from Victoria, BC. Will I have to register with the government if I live stream on my YouTube channel now? Don't quite understand everything yet. Blessings to you both. And I think that's intentional, right? That's why they released this on Friday afternoon, is to just confuse people, make it so that, you're not really sure. And as is the way with a lot of this ambiguously worded legislation put forward that I see repeatedly put forward by, quote unquote, lefties, by the Liberal government, it's intentionally ambiguously worded because they want you to be confused. There's no real clear direction. There's no clear way on how this will be enforced or otherwise. And it's for lack of a better word, it's a shit show.
Well, and
so
sorry to interrupt.
At this point,
I'm just going to interrupt real quick because this, again, I compare this to what they do to gun owners all the time because they register us and then they confiscate. But it grossly misunderstands the conservative mind, right? So they are expecting, as you said, Tamara, this sort of legislative chill to fall across podcasters and streamers, right? We don't know if we have to register, so I'm opposed to registration, so I'm just not going to start a podcast, or I'm just not going to start live streaming. That is not how the conservative mind works in my experience. And I would think that I have a very regular sort of run-of-the-mill mainstream conservative mind, and I have a proof point that I can use. I think conservatives are always like, if the government tells me not to do it, I'm going to do more of it and more obnoxiously. That's normally how I think of it. Like if you tell me I'm not allowed to go somewhere, I'll be there with bells on. And gun owners did this, right? When they said, oh, we're grandfathering out handgun ownership, we had a real run on handguns to the point where many stores were completely sold out and pre-sold on any of their inventory that was existing and inventory that was expecting to come in. And so I think we might see the opposite effect here, where the government is telling you that you can't go on the internet and share your unregistered ideas. You're going to see a bunch of people flood to Twitter, start streaming, or whatever it is now, X, flood to Rumble and start streaming, start podcasts all over the place, simply because now we know Justin Trudeau fears that we might actually have unregistered ideas and share them with the world. And so people are going to run out there and try to strike fear in the hearts of Canada's stupidest man.
Mm-hmm. And as it stands right now, it's the streaming platform that has to register. Yeah. But that's as it stands right now. And the way that things have worked in the past, as you've already mentioned, Sheila, especially with gun regulation, is we'll see if there comes a time when the individual podcasters will also have to register and regulate their podcast views. With that, we're about halfway through. So let's take a quick ad break and we'll come back to some LGBTQIA plus 7 madness.
Justin Trudeau's new censorship law, Bill C-18, it's a shakedown and a desperate attempt to keep the mainstream media afloat. Many have already lost their ability to access our Facebook and Instagram pages. The blackout will soon affect every user in Canada. We've partnered with Private Internet Access, a VPN provider dedicated to safeguarding digital privacy. For just $2 a month, you can maintain your access to our content across all your devices at piavpn.com/Rebel News.
Hey, Ben Shapiro here. This November, the Wilberforce Project is bringing me to Canada. If you want to fight the woke machine destroying families, join me in Calgary for my talk, hosted by the Wilberforce Project. Go to benshapirolive.ca for info and tickets.
Dr. James Lindsay, who is a frequent guest of both Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, and the host of the New Discourse podcast, is coming to Alberta for the first time.
And so the conclusion was that we now have to train men the way that we train dogs, with like leashes and shock collars and things, in order to get rape culture to go away.
Hermetic religion is actually the easiest way to kind of make sense, honestly, of the trans phenomenon as well.
Well, the queer theory thinks that there are certain people who get to set the norms of society.
Dr. Lindsay will be speaking directly to the dangers of critical theory and its gender ideology that are pushing their way into children's classrooms.
In queer theory, calling somebody saying you're a man or a woman is called a violence of categorization.
Why don't you say this is systemic sexism and distinguished from what most people think of as sexism? She said, no, it is sexism. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. But they're clearly not the same thing.
You don't want to miss this. Tickets are selling fast. You can get yours today. That is being run by Take Back Alberta, so you can get those tickets on their website. October 2nd and October 3rd are the dates. And it's going to be an incredible event.
That's tomorrow. That
right.
really snuck up on me. I didn't realize that was coming up so quickly. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's today in Edmonton, tomorrow in Calgary. Yes, let's, speaking of LGBTQ plus, I'm forgetting something. I'm going to get hate letters.
I think it's QSL. I don't even know anymore.
I don't know. I saw that Justin Trudeau has been rehearsing, because before he couldn't rattle it off. Now he just like hammers it out like at warp speed. So someone has been teaching him his alphabet. So that's cute. But over the weekend, actually, I think it was last night, Drea Humphrey was on Vancouver Island, where Megan Murphy, she's a Canadian journalist and a bit of an old school, slightly new school feminist, but she doesn't subscribe to this idea that men can just be women and often be better women than the rest of us girls. And she was speaking at a parents' rights event, and there was a counter protest, sounds like, of LGBTQ plus activists showing up, people who would probably describe themselves as feminists, showing up to shut up this woman. So I think we've got a video from Drea.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll make me straight. exciting. Hello. Hello. I'm just getting a shot of the signs. Hello. Hi, you guys are so nice. I like it when you're friendly. We are awesome. It really is.
I guess they couldn't bus any Antifa to the island.
Some creativity on this one.
And look at how nice Drea is being. And then somebody you can hear right at the end, we should follow her around. So Drea is, the woman doesn't have a mean bone in her body. She's nice to a fault. She's full of Christian compassion for other people. And despite the fact that she is having non-confrontational interactions, she's not criticizing people. She's just taking pictures of your signs because that's why you hold a sign, right? To get your message across. So she's just simply showing the sign. And at the very end of that, somebody is saying we should follow her around as to intimidate Drea, make sure that she doesn't tell the other side of the story.
Which they're not even able to articulate, right? We see that repeatedly, and that's arguably why they need to get so aggressive and deploy these intimidation tactics, is because they cannot articulate their stance. And when they're hit back with just a question, hey, what do you think of this? There's just an inability to think and to get a viewpoint across. And when you point out loopholes in what they're doing, and if they even recognize and realize what exactly that is that they're even protesting, they just look extremely silly. And so that's where you've seen this swoop in of organizations like the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, where they have put out tactics for these individuals to deploy on anyone who has an opposite or dissenting viewpoint that is aggression, bullying, intimidation, harassment of these individuals. So in hopes that it will only be their voice that's championed and anybody else will be terrified into submission, essentially. And I think that Drea, we had to hire security for her at that event because we've seen her targeted and harassed by these types before, these Antifa adjacent inclusivity lovers is what they tout to be. And so I don't know if it was just because it was on Vancouver Island, it was hard to get to, they couldn't afford to bus or fly or ferry in Antifa harassers. But yeah, it seemed like it was really tame, peaceful gathering. That would be a great event where you could maybe have a dialogue with people, because I see so much like it's my side and your side, and there's such a great divide. Right. And I think that if we could actually talk about what it is that brings, these parent protesters out versus what it is the LGBTQ whatever supporters think that they're supporting, how that might not be based on fact, I think that we would see that there is some common ground, and that in fact we have a lot of the same values in terms of like, we don't think that softcore porn should be taught to children through their state sanctioned curriculum. I don't think that that is like a far right, hateful, bigoted stance to take. And I think a lot of parents would concede and would say, oh, you know what? Yeah, that sounds really wrong and inappropriate. But they don't even know that that's happening, because these radicalized union leaders, for instance, with these parent protests that took place 2 weeks ago from across Canada, they had no idea that that's what parents were actually protesting, was this curriculum in the schools. And it's because it's done under the umbrella of SOGI 123, sexual orientation, gender identity, DEI or DIE, for some people like to acronym, the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And it's under the guise and the umbrella of these theories that are adjacent to the critical race theory, is where you see this radicalized, heavily sexualized content coming into the school system at extremely young ages. Like, these are in some instances kindergartners who are being given tasks and taught things that are just not even close to being on their radar and in a place where they can psychologically or cognitively understand. And I don't think that these activists realize that that's what parents are taking a stand against. It's not a hate or a transphobic thing. It's literally just protecting the innocence of their children from these radical extremists and those theories that they encompass.
You know, I'm glad that you pointed out that we don't disagree with some of these activists on macro issues. So the big picture stuff. For example, I am against this, of course, the suicidality of kids struggling with gender identity. I just disagree with how they plan to manage it or how they have been managing it. Because we do know that kids who struggle with their sexual identity are at increased risk of suicide. I just disagree with the interventions that the other side has to address this issue, because as the statistics show, their interventions are making it worse. So when that lady is holding a sign mindlessly that says SOGI, so that's the critical gender theory nonsense that they teach kids in BC schools, there's this SOGI 1, 2, 3, and it starts very young. She's holding that sign that says SOGI saves lives. Okay, that's you making that claim. So tell me about the instances of suicidality for these kids after they are exposed to SOGI 1, 2, 3. Has it decreased or has it increased? We know it has increased. So SOGI doesn't save lives. SOGI endangers lives. There's a problem there. Carving parents out of the life of a child that is experiencing suicidal ideations because they're struggling with their gender identity, I think is not a good way to protect that child. They want to protect kids. I want to protect kids too, but I think every child will benefit from 4 extra eyeballs on the mom and dad every single day if they're struggling with these issues. But these people want to keep secret so that one day parents wake up and their kid has attempted or has committed suicide and they had no clue that they should have been on the lookout for something because secrets were kept from those parents with the child. So I agree. We should be protecting kids, especially kids suffering from gender confusion. But I disagree with the tactics the other side is using. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because the often repeated mantra is that we don't care about kids. We definitely do. But I think that no one cares more for their children than the parents. I don't think a teacher loves my kids more than I do. And I think it's a bigotry of low expectations to say that Christian parents don't, and Muslim parents or new Canadians, that we don't possess unconditional love for our children. What a bigoted statement. But that is the crux of the argument coming from the other side of this when they say, no, parents mustn't know what's happening at the school because the parents will judge and therefore then not love that child. What an absolutely bigoted statement against people of faith.
Well, and it's really contradictory, and it highlights the hypocrisy of the left when they're like, oh, well, diversity is our strength, until it's a Muslim-led movement that's all about protecting the innocence of children and protesting these radical sexualized ideologies infiltrating our publicly funded schools. And then it's all of a sudden, well, that diversity is actually hate, right? There was that graphic that went around that no space for hate against these parent protests. And it's just absolutely astounding that this got the reach that it did, because that wasn't the basis of the protest. The protest was not about anything trans or homosexuality or whatever. It was literally just keep this kind of content away from young, impressionable children. Let them be kids, protect their innocence. If you want to teach your kids this kind of stuff at home and in your own private home life, and you're one of these radically inclusive people who thinks that the only way you can be inclusive is by taking your kid to drag queen story hour, then go right ahead, do what you want to do in your own time, but keep this out of our publicly funded schools, especially when it's often unbeknownst to parents that this kind of curriculum and these teachings are actually taking place. So it's like diversity is our strength until diversity doesn't align with this idea of inclusivity and tolerance under the rainbow flag. And then all of a sudden diversity is hate somehow to these extremists. And I just find it so funny that they're all about inclusivity and tolerance until you have a differing perspective to share. And then they don't even want to hear it. You can't even talk about it. Sadly, I have some family members who are like that, and they, claim to be all about diversity and inclusivity and tolerance. And I said, but I have a different point of view. And do you even know what my point of view is? Do you want to know? Can we talk about it? I'd like to know what your point of view is. And if you actually understand and realize where this protest is starting and what it stems from. And there's just not even a space to be able to have that dialogue, whether you agree or disagree or have some sort of middle ground. You can't even have that beginning of a conversation. And I find that highly ironic from the people who claim to be all about diversity and inclusivity. But that just also speaks to the second clip that we have from Drea, which it was inside the event. And the speakers were extending an invite to the protesters outside to see if they wanted to have a chat or learn a little bit more about the gender ideology debate.
That we would respectfully have some safeguards around that, but that we would like to do that. And we do have two who have come forward. They were in the comment section. We have Brooke.
No, my name is Jennifer.
Jennifer, okay, so I have you. Are you the advocates that came in that wanted to give voice and be present?
That came in, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to hand this over to the moderator, but this is the olive branch that we have extended so that we can remember that while we're giving voice, that it is up to each and every one of us to create the spaces for this dialogue.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm an organization coordinator for our group outside. And we just wanted to know, because this olive branch has been extended, although I'm not very trusting of it, walking into a room full of people that I have seen online spew hate is not super comfortable to me. But is this something that you guys, maybe not you guys, but maybe somebody from your community would be interested in, having a panel where there's both sides to have a conversation?
All right.
We've been trying to do that since 2016, and no one will join the panel. Like, media has tried to host, conversations with me and trans activists. People have tried to set up debates. People have tried to set up panels that shared both sides of the issues, and the other side has always refused. I really appreciate you coming in and speaking to us a lot, because that's, it's not very common that happens. But yeah, I think that, for me for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think that if the conversation could happen, that would be great. I know Serena would love that also.
And we
I think that
That's good.
Gets the point across there. And you can go back to Drea's Twitter, where you can see the last, I think it was roughly about a minute there remaining of dialogue. But, getting back to Trudeau's censorship laws and regulation of the internet, if that conversation ever took place, you'd never see it as a result of what the government is doing. They don't want you to see Canadians coming together and having those discussions and having those debates. I mean, we're supposed to live in a free and democratic society where the cornerstone of which is open dialogue and robust debate. And if you start to see that happening between everyday lay Canadians, and then they expect that to also happen in the House of Commons, in our parliament, where it's turning in, or has been for a long time, a clown show, that is exactly what the regime of Justin Trudeau doesn't want to see. I mean, this is the guy that campaigned on the wedge issue of vaccination status in his snap election in 2021. It's the divide and conquer narrative, really, that we're seeing in full force here with the LGBT divide that's happening here, and with these concerned parents. And if this censorship regime moves forward and goes through, if those conversations ever happen, you'll never see them broadcast widely on a platform because it doesn't fit the narrative.
I thought it was interesting that there was a little bit of hyperbole used there. Like, you're so scared of these people who have been spewing hate to you that you walked right in and walked up to the microphone, did you? Did you really? Because that's a gross admission that you're actually not scared of them at all, that you knew you would be welcomed to take the microphone and receive a round of applause for turning up. But there's a reason they don't want the debate to happen. And the reason they convince themselves that the other side is so intolerant and so crazy that they would never let you speak. And that is, and it goes back to something I heard Dr. Jay Bhattacharya say at the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom's George Jonas Freedom Award banquet last week. And that was, bad ideas do not withstand debate. So if you know, even if you can't admit it to yourself, but you know your idea is bad, you won't turn up to the debate. And that's what we see happening from the other side. And that's why there's this reliance from the Justin Trudeau Liberals on censorship all the time, is because bad ideas and lies do not stand up to the free and liberal exchange of ideas. So you got to shut up the other side, or convince yourself that the other side is so hate-filled that it's no use in even turning up to talk to them. And we see this is playing out in real time with the LGBTQ nonsense when it comes to parents. They don't even want to hear why parents don't want you keeping secrets with their kids. They just think these people hate their kids and they hate me, and so there's no point. And it's completely wrong, obviously.
And even if you share school board direct links with them saying, look, this is where the school board has said that they want to solicit the gender identity and the sexual orientation of your child in kindergarten. What exactly does that have to do with delivering education? Is it appropriate and is it necessary? And if questioning that appropriateness and necessity makes me hateful, then how is that even so? Like what, how do you come to that? Like, what kind of mental gymnastics are needed to come to that conclusion, where parents who are like, wait a minute, my kindergartner doesn't know anything about gender identity or sexual orientation, nor should they. And just simply by stating that they shouldn't, and they should certainly not be being taught this at school, unbeknownst to me, and through the lens of a teacher whose interpretation of this curriculum, I have no idea what that actually will tangibly look like when it's being taught to my child. Just for questioning that or wondering if that's necessary, that doesn't make somebody hateful. And so when you point that out to people and you point out these little loopholes, they just dig their head in the sand. They don't want to hear it. It doesn't align with the narrative that they've been radicalized by. And unfortunately, that curbs any form of conversation, even if you have a direct link and you can share it and say, hey, look, this is what they're asking of kids who are like 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
Anyway, and so over the weekend on this similar kind of topic, where it's this SOGI 123, the DEI, these progressive, supposedly progressive theories that you can't even talk about because they're so progressive. You have various provinces who are implementing legislation that mandates school boards not institute these policies where they do not disclose a child's change in pronouns or change of name. It's called social transition, and that's like the first step in a transition to another gender or personality disorder. But some provinces like Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, I think was the other one,
New Brunswick.
New Brunswick, and Ontario's kind of toying with it as well. But you recently had British Columbia's conservative leader under fire for likening the teaching of sexuality, gender to what happened with residential schools. And this is from the CBC, so it's unsurprising that they conflated what he was saying, because he wasn't likening the teaching of sexuality and gender to students. He was likening that policy, where many school boards have went ahead and instituted these policies that explicitly state that you are not to disclose a change in gender identity or pronoun use to a student's parents. And so some of these other provinces have said, wait a minute, for anybody who's under the age of 16, like, these are minors that we're talking about. We have to disclose this to the parents, and keeping them in the dark is actually dangerous. And as you've already discussed, Sheila, it can lead to further harms through things like suicidal ideation and other mental comorbidities that usually go in hand with gender dysphoria. But anyway, the tweet from John Rustad was, "Today is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, or Orange Shirt Day, or if you're Justin Trudeau, National, why can't I think of the word, not skiing?
Surfing.
Thank you.
Surfing
National
Day.
Surfing Day." He says, "Today we remember what happens when the Canadian government thinks it's better at raising children than parents. I will always stand with parents." And so this is exactly the same thing. When parents oppose the being kept in the dark by state-sanctioned curriculum and state-sanctioned gender dysphoria diktats, this, like the parallels that he draws here are very clear and concise. This has nothing to do with, as the CBC has spun it, the teaching of sexuality and gender. This is about keeping parents in the dark and thinking that the state knows better about what's best for your kids than their parents themselves.
Right. The outrage here speaks to how true he was in saying that. And I have Indigenous friends who say the same thing. Like, this is what happens when the state determines what your values should be. And that's what's happening here. And everybody's mad because he's right. He's right. The state should, as Justin Trudeau's dad said, get out of the bedrooms of the nation, but it also has to get out of the kitchen tables of the nation, because these are conversations for parents with kids when parents decide the kids are ready, if at all. It should not involve government-run schools infecting your child with the mind virus of whatever this nonsense is. And the idea, once again, that parents who have a different worldview couldn't possibly love their children enough to get through whatever this issue is bigotry. And MLA Rustad was right, and that's why everybody's mad at him. He was a little too right. And in Justin Trudeau's world, that tweet would be nuked under new censorship legislation.
That's right. And tweets like the following, which come from the Ontario Principals Council, would be highlighted and shared broadly. So I guess October, as we enter this month, today is October 2nd, but we're once again apparently celebrating there it is. There's the acronym, 2SLGBTQQIA plus month. See, I missed that extra Q. I didn't know there was another one.
What is that for? Questioning.
Oh my God.
Queer and questioning.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
And then, yeah. Anyway, so there's another month here that we're recognizing the history of the diverse lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities. We encourage our schools and students to become allies and stand up against discrimination, bullying, and harassment. I mean, didn't we already do Pride? So first we had Pride weekend, right? It started in Toronto and maybe other city centers, I think about 15, maybe longer years ago. So there was Pride weekend, and it was like that one-day parade, and maybe it ricocheted a little bit into the next day. And then there was Pride week. Then there was Pride month. Now there's Pride season, and I guess we're still in Pride season, or is it just Pride year and like endlessly now?
I have no idea, but what a hell of a marketing gimmick if you're selling those Pride flags. That you can just sell them all year long now. This is wonderful if you are selling that kind of stuff. But I like how they keep expanding the acronym there, so that pretty soon we're all going to be members of the LGBTQ community once they add letters for everybody else. Like, are you a heterosexual tomboy like me? I guess. They're going to get me in there one of these days. Like, it just never ends till now. We've got people who are questioning. They're in there too now. It's never ending. We're all going to be gobbled up by the LGBTQ acronym one day, and there will be no escape. It'll just be all encompassing. And it'll get us all.
You can't just be Canadian, because that was supposed to be like all encompassing and diverse. And but that, I guess, is now like textbook bigotry. We have to now switch out and have like every color of the rainbow and every symbol. Like, I don't even know what that purple circle is for. At one time, I thought that there was like the lesbian, gay, bi, and bi was supposed to originally like encompass kind of every like queerness. Then there was trans, and that was supposed to be everyone. Anyway, it just keeps getting longer and longer. And as Billboard Chris points out here too, he reposted this. He just said it never ends, and like that's kind of where I am at this point. I'm like, when does it end? And when do we get real recognition for things like our veterans who literally fought for your freedom to be whatever you wanted to be here and speak freely and express yourself freely, right? Because that's what these people are capitalizing on. They're capitalizing on free expression, free speech, and the ability to be whatever they want to be without state interference. And they do it, and it's fine. And nobody really cares that you let them have their Pride weekend, whatever. You steer clear if you have young children and you don't want them exposed to sexual perversion and nudity, and otherwise you just whatever. And this is now the culmination of when radicalized people have infiltrated this lesbian gay movement, and now they just want to take everything over and start to funnel their theories into the impressionable minds of your children at school without your knowledge or consent. And that's where parents have said, whoa, hold on a minute, we've had enough. This is where we finally draw the line. And so our veterans who fought for their ability to freely express themselves, they don't get a day, like they don't even get a whole day. They get a moment of silence on November 11th for 1 minute at 11 o'clock. There's no month, there's no weekend, there's not even a holiday. So that I find to be a huge injustice and extremely hypocritical, because they literally fought for people's ability to have this kind of expression, whether you agree with it or not.
Well, and they took spooky season from me. It's October. Let me have October, please. We're overtime, but while I have you, Tamara, because this is one that I wanted to talk about with Tamara, because you are our, I would say you're our medical issues reporter, and I think we should put that on your business cards. But you're also the COVID statistics nerd, and I say that in the most loving and positive way possible. Scientists Catalin Carrico and Drew Weissman have won the 2023 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for discoveries that enabled the development of, I love how they just threw this in just without any truth whatsoever, effective vaccines against COVID-19, the award-giving body said on Monday. So these guys have won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for creating vaccines that, well, I'll just say it. And again, if I get us kicked off on YouTube, I'm very sorry, but they did not stop the spread of COVID-19. And yet they get it for creating effective vaccines. Okay.
Yeah, this whole like the marketing slogan. So the safe and effective, we have to remember, is all a big pharma marketing slogan. It's a way to sell product. It's marketing 101. It's safe and effective, And we heard that repeated over and over and over again. And I know that we're still on YouTube, so I'm going to try to be mindful of how I'm wording things. But I wanted to bring up a report that I did in May of 2021 with emergency room physician, Dr. Mark Benoit. Maybe, hold on, I'll just put the link in here so we can pull it up, because I really urge people, I mean, these are reports, and I go back sometimes into the Rebel archive of some of my reports that I did very early on in 2021. When I was just actually coming back from maternity leave. At that time, I had an 8-week-old, and I was doing interviews with these physicians because I'm seeing the rollout and what's happening. And already people were starting to come forward and say, hold on a minute, this is, I've had a reaction, or this has happened to me post-injection. And so I couldn't just sit idly by on maternity leave and not report on that. So Mark Benoit was one of the very first people, other than Dr. Mark Trosi, who came forward and wanted to sound the alarm on what Big Pharma was calling efficacious with their novel injections. And the mRNA platform was developed, and you can follow Dr. Malone, who really worked side by side to develop this platform. And it was developed as a cancer treatment. And so the entire basis of the mRNA platform is that it is meant to biodistribute throughout your entire body. And so this false notion that the mRNA injection stayed in your deltoid, in your shoulder, was never based on science or fact. And so I just, as a precursor there, that's what the mRNA was originally developed and used for, was novel cancer therapies. It's a therapeutic. But there was a quote in here, and the whole interview itself is really great, and Dr. Benoit says a really, really great things. But about, I don't know, halfway down the web copy component, or 3/4 of the way down, I note in here that Dr. Benoit explains the difference between safety and efficacy in light of Pfizer claiming that their product, remember they said it's 100% effective in its trial participants. He details that what this study actually documented was merely antibody production in the participants' blood work 7 days following vaccination, and not necessarily prevention of infection or death. So they had an antibody response, and that's 7 days following vaccination. I think they followed them for up to 14 days. And then it was like, all right, now you're on your own. And I guess we hope that you're immune for a while still. But we've seen that the data, the real world data coming out now, shows that in fact that immunity wanes very clearly over time, and it actually counter affects your natural immunity if you had any. So if you were naturally immune and you received these novel injections, the waning immunity from the injection actually hinders your natural robust immunity. And so we can see more and more how these sorts of reports are aging really nicely. And this clinging to the marketing slogan of safe and effective is not based on actual science or evidence. And I hope that doesn't get us kicked off of YouTube.
No, I remember pulling what it meant when they said that these things are deemed safe by Health Canada. And they never tested them for efficacy. Health Canada didn't do any of that. But they did test them to see, like, what they meant by safe was not that they didn't cause adverse events. I'm doing my best to dance around the YouTube restrictions. But what they meant was they didn't contain anything that would cause immediate harm or death, to the best of their knowledge. So were they radioactive? Did they have like a virus that would instantly kill you or anything like that? Like, that's what they meant by these things are safe, feel free to get them. It didn't exclude adverse reactions or even anaphylaxis or anything like that. It was like, do these things contain like motor oil? Nope. Okay. Like that's what they meant. And so technically speaking, they were right to say that these were Health Canada approved, or at least Health Canada authorized as safe. But they never quite explained to the public what they meant when they made that claim, as you rightly point out.
Well, and the safety profile is still largely unknown because the phase 3 clinical trial is not set to be complete until December 2023. So I think later this year, is it 20? Yeah, I believe it's 2023. And I think it was Keith Wilson who posted that when he cross-examined one of the senior officials of Health Canada, Celia Lorenko. She, clarified and confirmed that the phase 3 clinical trials weren't complete when Health Canada authorized this in December of 2020, right? Not even a year into this apparently unprecedented pandemic. And yet 8 months later, we already had some novel injections, and the phase 3 clinical trials aren't set to be complete until December of 2023. And in those clinical trials, the placebo arm, so the gold standard of safety testing is through randomized placebo-controlled safety study. And what the manufacturers did, or the sponsors, in this case, Pfizer and Moderna, is they unblinded their placebo arm. I think it was 8 weeks, so approximately 2 months after the study was underway, because it was apparently an ethical concern that the people who were in the placebo arm weren't actually going to be protected, right? Because the marketing slogan at the time was safe and effective, safe and effective. So they all wanted to be in the trial arm, not the placebo arm. So they went ahead and unblinded everybody, gave the placebo arm the novel injections So I don't even know what kind of actual clinical trial they have left at this point. But regardless, it's not to be completed until December of 2023. And for the ones, the phase 1 and 2 that are, and phase 2, I might be wrong on, but phase 1's complete. But the results aren't even posted yet. You can go on the clinical trials website of NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the data is not even up. So what those clinical trials even end up finding, I don't know how they even get away with saying safe and effective at this point, because there's nothing to point to that being accurate.
No.
And
yet they still keep repeating it. And the journalists are like, yep, see, told you, listen to this government official who's telling you that it's safe and effective.
Let's give these guys Nobel Prizes. I mean,
yes.
That is just outrageous.
Yeah. Yep. Nobel Peace Prizes, or Nobel Prize in Medicine for...
Medicine Prize, yeah.
Yeah, look at them. They're wearing their masks to accept their awards. That is just...
science.
Chef's kiss. Like it's just too perfect. And yet, we don't even know the full scale of the society-wide damage that may or may not have been done by the rushed administration of these vaccines. And of course, how can we not acknowledge the damage that the rushed administration of these vaccines did to civil liberties across the world, and human rights across the world, and human dignity across the world. But yes, enjoy your meaningless prize, because when they give a prize to people for this sort of stuff, it is purely political and absolutely meaningless in terms of science.
There you have it.
There you have it. We're done the show. We don't have any chats. Olivia, we read the one earlier. We didn't touch on everything that we wanted to do, but I'm sure we can get to the other things tomorrow if we want. Tamara, thanks for being my co-host on the show. I appreciate that you talk as much as I do, because I feel like I monopolize the show when I'm with poor Alexa, and she's like, yep. And I just give her the whole time. I'm glad you take the reins sometimes. I want to thank everybody who tuned in, watching us across all the platforms that Justin Trudeau wants to censor, to everybody who works behind the scenes in HQ in Toronto, but also across the country, to make sure the show is there for you, wherever you want to watch it, whenever you want to watch it. Thanks to everybody who pitched in a little bit to keep the lights on. And as David Menzies always says, although I don't think he takes his own advice sometimes, stay sane.
Do you want to start feeling like your pre-COVID self again? You're not alone. The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is an all-natural supplement to help people do just that. It was created by cardiologist Peter McCullough and his expert team of doctors to help the people experiencing effects from COVID and the you-know-what. Go to twccanada.health/rebel today.
Come on out November 25th. It's all aboard the Freedom Train in Niagara-on-the-Lake. You can check Rebel News for updates and also the Freedom Passport site.
Tamara Leach, who led the Truckers Convoy, will be sharing the stage with some of the finest international recording artists, like the Chops Horns from New York City, who's played with Alicia Keys, Stevie Wonder, the Rolling Stones, and many more. Plus